Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 14, Episode 144. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. Day Pittsburgh getting ready for day 2 of their 3-day mandatory minicamp, and we got a lot more to talk about today on this show than we did on Monday's show. We got Mike Tomlin, we got Zach Frazier, those guys locked up with contracts. Hearing from Danny Smith, scouting changes. This is a greatest hits episode of the podcast for myself, Dave.
Yeah, based on how kind of slow it's been with topics the last couple of shows, it's kind of refreshing to have something. I mean, we're going to have a lot. We're going to have a lot of things to talk about today, and obviously leading off the show with the Tomlin extension. I'm sure we'll make a few people happy and a few people very angry with our comments and thoughts on that. So I would suppose that's where we're going to start today. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. You are correct, sir. Monday, a little after our morning show wrapped up around, I think, 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, the Pittsburgh Steelers announcing they signed Mike Tomlin to a 3-year extension through the 2027 season. We knew an extension was coming. Ownership confirmed that earlier in the offseason. The question was, when would it take place and for how many years? Would it be the more typical 3-year extension, which Tomlin has done multiple times in Pittsburgh, or would it be a shorter deal that may signal something about Tomlin or his status going forward? But it is that 3-year deal, one of the highest paid coaches in the NFL. Dave, your thoughts?
All right. First and foremost, if you didn't see this coming, if you're listening to this podcast and you didn't see this coming, welcome back from your coma, I guess. We've talked about it several times. It wasn't a matter really if this extension would get done. It's a matter of when. Not surprised by it whatsoever. Was a little bit surprised, I suppose, that it's 3 years and not 2 years, but my mouth didn't drop down to my desk. That wasn't that level of a surprise there. My thoughts on the overall thing here. Well, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably fall in one of two groups. Either you're totally on board with this extension, or you absolutely hate it. I get both sides of it. I look at it this way. It's a question you have to ask yourself. Do you believe that Mike Tomlin still has what it takes to lead this team, not only to on a long, deep playoff run, but potentially another Super Bowl win as well? If you can answer that question with a yes, then you obviously should be on board with this extension. If you answer that question with a resounding no, you don't believe Mike Tomlin is that guy, then you obviously are probably upset about this extension overall. I still think Mike Tomlin has what it takes to get this done. I do, however, agree that not having a playoff win since 2016 is really unacceptable for this organization and Tomlin at this point. I think Mike Tomlin has made a lot of mistakes the last several years, most notably, I think, hiring Matt Canada to be his offensive coordinator, and then effectively, and really the whole Steelers organization in general, them essentially doubling down on bringing Matt Canada back after the first 2 years, when it was pretty evident that it looked like they were just spinning their wheels, and they had Kenny Pickett going into his second season, and that I mean, that really hurt this franchise, I think, last season when it came to that. And obviously the quarterback's gone, the offensive coordinator's gone. Now at this point, it felt like it was going to be a wasted season, almost right out of chute. Now, to Tomlin's credit, I believe the fact that he got that team into the playoffs last year somehow, some way, with a third string quarterback, and just the attrition this team had at the linebacker position, and no, injuries are not an excuse. But I mean, the fact that he got him into the playoffs last year, I think, kind of is a testament of what he can do and how he doesn't lose teams. And obviously, that came on the heels of a couple of disgusting losses against the Patriots and the Cardinals and the Colts and all like that. So I'm fine with it. It will be this next 3 years, I think, will really be a question of how much further Mike Tomlin coaches beyond that. It obviously ties him, I believe, to Arthur Smith these next 3 years. And yeah, that's where I'm at with it. Put me on record as being okay with this, and put me down as thinking that I think Mike Tomlin still has what it takes.
That's what I was going to ask you to answer the question you started off with. Do you believe that Tomlin is still capable of leading this team to a Super Bowl?
Yeah, I do. I am.
What gives you that thought, given the last 7 years of no playoff wins?
I think that he's got a better coordinator in place. I think just altogether the coaching staff is put together better at this point than it has been in several years. Outside of them needing one more wide receiver on this team, something I've talked about all offseason, I think they're in pretty good shape overall when it comes to the offensive side of the football. I think the defense is in really good shape right now, assuming everybody can stay healthy on that side of football. And I think just, Mike Tomlin and his ability to keep his players buying in, good, bad, whatever. I think that he has what it takes still.
I think that last part is the most important one, and why the Rooneys in Pittsburgh gave Tomlin this extension, because players still bought in. He still was able to command that room. To me, a no-brainer of why and when you fire a coach. There's multiple reasons, but I think the biggest one is if you ever lose that locker room, that coach cannot come back, because you're just not going to be able to come back from that. Players are not going to buy in unless you just make a complete roster wholesale change to leadership, to core players, to most of the roster. You're not going to get those guys back. But Tomlin has never lost that locker room. It's the number one thing I can say about him for his entire tenure, is that to do that for the stretch hired in 2007, to never lose that group, good times, bad times, whatever, is remarkable. It is really, truly impressive. But, as much as the national media wants to tout the never had a losing season, and you can appreciate that from afar, given how tough it is to consistently win in the NFL, especially some of the difficult years where it felt like that streak was going to potentially break, 2019, 2012, 2013, the last 2 years as well. That's not the standard in Pittsburgh. And Tomlin recognizes and realizes that, but you can't have this playoff, winless streak extend throughout the next contract extension. He's got to be able to win a playoff game and hopefully do more than that. So his goals are, can he find a quarterback? He's never really proven he can do that. He inherited Ben. It's been bumpy post Ben. That's common for a lot of teams transitioning away from their Hall of Fame franchise quarterback, but that's going to be his mission. You've had stability at head coach. Can you find stability at quarterback? If you can't, it's going to be really difficult to gain traction and win, especially in this ultra competitive AFC North and AFC. But, I'm fine with the move overall. I'm not surprised about the extension. This says that Tomlin is committed, for all the rumors and speculation. And even Mike Florio continues to bang that drum about Tomlin had options. He was considering options. He is committed to coaching. He would not have done a 3-year extension if he was not committed to coaching. So hopefully we can put that side of the argument to bed. But these next couple of years through 2027, find a quarterback, win some playoff games. To me, those are musts. And if that does not happen, then you have a very serious conversation about needing to move on, post 2027.
Right. I would agree. And I don't think Mike Tomlin's, I think a couple of very disappointing seasons would have to happen back to back here for Mike Tomlin not to play out at least his contract as is now. Man, he's still young. He's 50. I teased the other day, in another 17 years, Mike Tomlin will only be 69, So, but Mike Tomlin, I think, even said during his short press conference after practice on Monday there that what do you say? I've seen more years in this league, in this job than I will moving forward. I mean, he's coached. He's been a head coach for more years in the league than he'll be a head coach moving forward. And it doesn't take, you don't have to be a rocket surgeon or a heart scientist to figure that out. But on the flip side of that, I think he really still enjoys the overall process of this thing. I think he likes going down and being the mayor of Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Everything related to the pre-draft process. I think he still loves. I believe he still loves the game. I think he loves being part of watching the game grow as part of the competition committee. I think he still likes being in the locker room with the guys and coaching the guys. So if he can get something done within these next 3 years, and that means winning multiple playoff games, he might be around longer than just the 3 years. But this is a very important 3 years on him. Look, I mean, I get the detractors of him. I get people at this point saying, look, we're sick and tired of not having a playoff win since 2016. The non-losing record's not enough. I definitely get that part of it. I mean, there is still a faction of the fan base that say, look, he inherited Big Ben, and anybody could have probably done that and maybe come out of it with at least one Super Bowl championship. There's people that think that there should obviously be more than one, Tomlin Lombardi trophy at this point. I get it. He did, however, take him to another Super Bowl against the Packers. Unfortunately, lost that. But there should be a lot more playoff wins on Tomlin's resume at this point. And these next 3 years, you can understand, I think, assuming indeed that Arthur Smith got 3 years, which I think is generally the case with offensive coordinators. It's reasonable to tie those two together. I do have. Is there anything you'd like to add on that? Because there's another kind of direction I want to kind of go with this.
Not to be technical, but I guess Smith is only through 2026. Wouldn't his 3-year deal be 24, 25, 26? And Tomlin's a 3-year extension that puts him through 27?
Sure. So what I'm saying is at least those two are tied together.
Okay. Yeah. For through the length of Smith's contract. Sure. I'm with you there.
Right.
Okay.
Now we've mentioned the word quarterback several times while talking about Mike Tomlin. I do have to wonder at this point, especially with this being a crucial, next 3 years for Mike Tomlin, or 3 additional years for Mike Tomlin. Man, I'm not saying it's going to play out this way, but I did find myself wondering after that news was announced the other day, what happens if one of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields is not the answer? If this organization can determine in 2024 by whatever means necessary that both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are not the answer at quarterback, what happens at that point? I think you said the other day in the live stream, well, you just got to go out and draft a quarterback. All right. But I mean, is that something that Mike Tomlin wants to go through again? And is it the right thing to go through again, coming out of the 2024 season, if indeed 2025, you say, man, we got to do something here, and we got to draft another quarterback and hope is Mike Tomlin's whole future at that point from 2025 for the rest of his contract as it is now tied to that one selection of a quarterback?
In all likelihood, because the quarterback defines your team. As he goes, so does your team, positively or negatively. And I don't mean to say flippantly, well, if I was the GM, I would just go draft the next great quarterback. Obviously, that's everyone's goal. It's harder to do in Pittsburgh, traditionally picking in that 15 to 25 range. You're not in line to get that blue chip quarterback that turns your season right. It's the one downside to being a team that never has a losing season, is you never get to have that terrible year that puts you in the top 5, top 3 to get that next franchise quarterback that hopefully the CJ Strouds, the Joe Burrows that transform your franchise in an instant. But either way, if Wilson nor Fields are the guy, you're going down some path you've gone down before, either the veteran route, which they would have gone with Trubisky, and then Wilson, either that's a trade route, which they would have gone through with Justin Fields, or the draft route, which you went through with Kenny Pickett. So you're taking the same stroll down a path you've gone down before, regardless of what option you take. I advocate for the draft because who are the best teams in football right now, Dave? It's like the Chiefs, the Bills, the Eagles fell off second half of last year, but they've been competitive. The Ravens, etc. All those teams drafted their quarterbacks, homegrown guys. There are some exceptions out there, obviously, but majority of the top teams in football have homegrown quarterbacks, first-round quarterbacks, and that's the model that Pittsburgh will probably have to mimic.
Sure, and if you go back to that several string of years from the start of the Tom Brady era and on through until kind of really Tom Brady retired, you had really the same group of, what was it, 6 or 7 quarterbacks winning the Super Bowl. What was it? Brady, Manning. Russell Wilson was in there. Roethlisberger obviously in there.
Mm-hmm. Mahomes.
I
mean, more recently, but yeah.
Yeah, but you start going through them, and I know Brady was on a different level and all like that. But I mean, make no mistake about it, this is a quarterback-driven league. So, I understand where you come from, but on top of, does Tomlin have the time to wait?
He does, because he's not getting fired. He's going to play out his contract or coach out his contract.
Does Mike Tomlin leave when Mike Tomlin says he leaves?
It's certainly tracking that way.
I guess that that's the now that we're past the actual extension, that's probably going to. And it probably was the question in some in the heads of some fans that ahead of this anyway. Does Mike Tomlin coach the Steelers until Mike Tomlin no longer wants to coach the Steelers anymore?
It's looking that way. Now, again, if you've not won a playoff game through 2027, I don't know how you justify the extension after that. I think you can certainly debate the worthiness of it now based on the track record, what's happened since 2017. But you certainly, if you go, well over a decade without a playoff win at that point, I would advocate, at least personally, to move on if there's no playoff wins, if you feel like there's not been any progress or any season where you've gotten closer to the goal than you have been before. But, Noel stepped down on his own accord, Cowher, and Tomlin seems to be given every chance to do the same.
Does the shaking of the fist at the clouds by old man Art Rooney II back in January match? Was that just, what was the exact? We read them the other night on the Facebook live stream.
Impatience about not winning in the playoffs.
All right, well, that's done. I take it you're fully on. I mean, you are on board with this.
Yeah,
I poured out my thoughts on it.
Sure, I'm not as negative about it or as unhappy about it as a lot of the fan base is. I'm not going to necessarily, champion it and say this is the greatest move in the world. We knew the extension was coming. I just was wondering how many years would it be? Maybe a 2-year extension, a slight departure from the typical 3-year, which may reflect either the team's, maybe uncertainty or Tomlin not knowing exactly how much longer he'll be coaching. But 3 years says, it's the full-fledged commitment on both sides overall. So that's what I was really watching for, was just a year aspect that kind of tells me Pittsburgh's thoughts on Tomlin, Tomlin's thoughts on Pittsburgh and coaching. I guess, though, honestly, if you're going to commit, then commit. Don't do the 1-2 year deal. Go all in if you feel like he's your guy. Pittsburgh does. Time will tell. But that's the mission going forward. Find that quarterback, get those playoff wins. You feel that urgency, you feel that angst. I certainly feel it. The fan base feels it. It seems that ownership feels it as well. Those things have to change. They have to change pretty quickly.
Do you believe that Mike Tomlin still has what it takes to guide a team to a Super Bowl championship?
Yes, I think he is capable of being able to do that. The question is, though, can you find that quarterback who is capable of doing it? And I don't want to absolve Tomlin of that. I was reading something, I think Albert Breer wrote yesterday, that, Tomlin hasn't had a win in 7 years, but look at his quarterback situation, look at his OC. That's Tomlin's responsibility. Right. That falls on Tomlin. His job is, it's not him solely. There's Omar Khan, GM, front office, but his job is to get a quarterback for this team. He gets a lot of input and say on how this roster is built and who his guys are, especially, I think, post Kevin Colbert. So you don't get to wave the, he couldn't find a quarterback. He didn't have a quarterback. That's his job. So I just want to make that point very clear.
As far as we know, as when it comes to input that Mike Tomlin has in the draft and the hiring of coordinators and coaches and to some degree off-season personnel, free agents added and re-signings. And, obviously we don't know with certainty how much percentage or what say he has in this. But what I'm getting at here is, what would you view as Mike Tomlin's biggest mistake to date?
Of his entire coaching career?
Of his entire coaching career. And I know that's a long time. It's hard to go back and pick out, there's obviously been several. I mean, we're not saying that he's just made one mistake, but I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is the hiring of Matt Canada one of his biggest mistakes, I guess.
I think so. I think I would expand it slightly to just say his OC hirings of the last couple cycles to the in-house promotions of Randy Fichtner. And I like Randy Fichtner. I think he was a good guy. I don't know if he was the right guy for the moment. I think he was, just kind of deferring to Ben a lot. And maybe that wasn't the healthiest thing for this team. Certainly Canada was a disaster hiring him. And then, as you said, maybe even worse off is holding on to him, which, maybe that was more of a Rooney thing where they didn't want to fire the guy and pay him. But I'm sure if Tomlin wanted him gone, he would have been gone if they felt like that had to have happened. So I think that was certainly a big mistake. I'm sure there's others, but in terms of the big picture view of it, that's probably it. I just, in some sense, you feel like Tomlin is able to, he's at his best when the chips are down, when everyone counts him out. Last year, 2019, without Ben, he's able to rally these teams. Whenever he's had some teams in recent years that have been more competitive, looking like one of the better teams in football, 2018, 2020, you've underwhelmed and you've, kind of fallen apart and not gotten as far as you've thought. So the concern is that he's able to do really well under those tough circumstances where most people crack and they tank and they just fall apart. But he struggled more recently whenever he's had some really talented rosters, and also just trying to balance out getting a good offense and a good defense. Always feels like one side is so much heavier weighted than the others. In the 2018 time, your offense is really good. Your defense struggled. Now your defense is strong and your offense has been scuffling for years. You're not able to find that balance to really, truly make a run at this thing.
And make no mistake about it. Mike Tomlin's had some teams that should have gone farther in the playoffs than they went, right?
For sure. 2018 certainly comes to mind. But it also probably for him, he would say, not stepping in front of Jacoby Jones on the field. Probably one of his mistakes, a more in the moment type of thing. But that one, not fun for his wallet.
All right. I'm pretty sure that first 30 minutes talking about Tomlin will get us some comments. How about that?
I'm sure there'll be comments. Yes, there'll be some expressions of opinions in our email machine. All right, Dave, something a little less controversial here, but also expected. Zach Frazier, Dave, you called. You said Frazier would get his deal done during minicamp. It happened. Wasn't 8 minutes after the podcast, like I said on Monday, but a couple hours after Frazier inking his deal. So give us the contract details in that all-important guaranteed portion of that contract.
Yeah, what's the old saying about sometimes a broken clock is a broken clock is right twice a day? I mean, if you follow this stuff, it was easy to kind of see this coming, especially with the time frame with him, especially when it relates to the big question of where that line in the sand would be drawn as far as guarantees in the third year of these second round guys in that span. And once we got that line drawn about a week and a half ago, and then you started to see Zach Frazier kind of get boxed in with Adonai Mitchell, and who was the guy a couple of spots ahead. I'm drawing a blank now. That is signed. You knew this was coming because everybody was waiting to kind of have a deal to work off of. And that's why it was, I think I wrote on Thursday that Zach Frazier deal was probably not too far off. And as you stated, I thought sometime during mandatory minicamp it would get done. We already knew the outline of this thing thanks to the slotting system. His contract totals out at almost $7.55 million. And it includes a signing bonus of just over $2.3 million. His cap charge for his rookie season will be $1.371 million and some change. The only real unknown ahead of him signing was that guaranteed amount of the third year money in 2026. Now that the deal's been filed, it looks like 54% of that year three money, specifically almost $800,000 of his $1.48 million that he's due in 2026 is guaranteed. That means that in total, right around 66.8% of his entire deal is guaranteed, and not bad from his side of the negotiating table, if you will, especially when you look back to 2023, and the 51st overall selection in that draft was Miami Dolphins cornerback Cam Smith, and he did not receive any guaranteed money in the third year of his deal. So it was just a matter of getting him boxed in, working off some deals behind him, and that thing finally got done, and that means the entire draft class is now under contract.
Yeah, certainly one benefit of the CBAs in recent, versions is these rookie slotting contracts that make things a lot easier to get done without really any threats of holdouts and guys missing time. Let's test your prediction skills here, Dave. You're on a roll right now. What is the latest draft pick that will get some percentage of third year guaranteed base salary?
I think we already know that.
Do we?
Yeah. Oh. I believe we already know that if I can pull it up, because I think we already had the floor set.
Didn't somebody get like 4%, Blake Fisher or something?
Yeah, because remember who's the Ravens tackle that didn't? Rosengarten didn't, and I think the guy before him. So I was able to cheat when it comes to that. So I think that's what kind of expedited things overall here, is we kind of knew at that point, who was it here? Let me look. I know Ravens tackle. Who was it?
It was Rosengarten.
Yeah, he did not get any guarantees. I know Blake Fisher was the one that I believe is going to end up. Has Cole Bishop signed yet?
Good question. I can check. I knew Fisher had gotten something small in that percentage. I do not know for sure if Cole Bishop has signed.
And Rakestraw, what was his situation there? Let me look real quick on Rakestraw. Does not look like Rakestraw got any guaranteed money in the third year of his deal. So maybe he ended up being the cutoff. I don't know if Cole Bishop has signed yet.
Yeah, can't tell for sure, but that seems to be the cutoff there.
Right,
so,
right.
And what was the cutoff last year? Do you know?
Oh, it was Keanu Benton, right?
Benton didn't get anything last year?
No, he did get something. So the player, he was the cutoff last year, I believe, was Keanu Benton. So whoever the one after him was did not, I believe.
So you think by next year, all second rounders are going to get some level of guaranteed money, the way this thing's tracking?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because if you're looking at, we'll have to see what happens with at least we know that Blake Fisher did, and he was 59th overall, and there was only 64th overall was the final second round pick. So next year we'll have to wait and see how far down, maybe into the third round.
Yeah.
They're gonna. I mean, because that line in the sand moved kind of significantly,
right?
This year when it came to the second round. Guys. So I think the big talk next year will be how far down into the third round are the third year guarantees.
Yeah, because it moved from 49th as the cutoff last year, you're saying, to at least 59th, maybe even 60th this year. And so, yeah, you probably could see the first third round pick get some guaranteed money next year.
Yeah, I think what really started to get this ball moving when it came to this large selection of second rounders that had not signed, of which Zach Frazier was almost in the middle of, was that signing of Blake Fisher. Once that deal got done, then all those other guys ahead of them knew at that point they were going to get some percentage of the third year money guaranteed. And then obviously once Adonai Mitchell got his deal done, that set an immediate floor for Zach Frazier.
I know that is the most interesting topic for people to talk about, the third year guarantees. We're going to switch to one. What's that, Dave? You're going to say something?
No, I just going to say, yeah, I know everybody's just waiting for that portion of the podcast. Hey, we nerd where we like to nerd.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Alex has got some nerding to do here in a little bit.
We're going to stick with our nerding right now. We do not apologize for our nerdiness, but I know a lot of people do appreciate it. But my favorite topic here, the scouting department front office changes for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Dave, Monday, just checking. I always check once per day. Monday was a busier day with the Tomlin news, the Frazier news. I forgot to look throughout the day. It was like 1 a.m. Just happened to go on Steelers.com, check the site, see if there's any updates in terms of, front office changes, and struck oil. It was my Christmas year. A ton of changes here in Pittsburgh's front office officially announced by the team. These probably have happened a couple weeks back, and they're just a delay to actually get updated, but they had not been largely reported. Pittsburgh adding 4 members to their front office. They are Quentin Harris, listed as a senior personnel assistant, Max Gruder, assistant director of player scouting, Matt McCrate, a Blesto scout, and Jimmy Knoll, an area scout. We already knew about Knoll coming on board. He's going to scout the Northeast region for Pittsburgh. Departures, there's 3 of them. Bill Kreidler, senior scouting assistant. We knew about his retirement after 33 years with Pittsburgh. Fawaz Azudian, a Blesto scout, been with the team for 6 years. He is out. And Bronson Williams, who had served as a scouting intern for a couple years, is also no longer listed on the team site. 2 minor title changes. Dennis McInnes is listed as just a pro scout after he was previously a pro and college scout. And then Tozin Kazim had been their team's football analyst, done some scouting as well. He is now listed as the football analytics coordinator. Don't know if his role is actually changing, but the title has changed. And so that is another big shakeup here to the Steelers scouts. And really, it's harder and harder to find the Kevin Colbert stamp on this front office, on these scouts. There's only a couple of scouts from the Colbert era who are still with Pittsburgh. So some pretty significant changes overall, Dave.
All right. So what this is now, I guess, is a byproduct of, contracts expiring, right? More than likely with some of these scouts, and a combination of Weidel and Omar Khan regime, if you will, getting more established.
Yeah, I would say so. There's certainly some names to replace. If Kreidler was going to step down and retire, which he did, have to replace him. Remember, Dave Pettit had left the team sometime, it appears early in 2024, and so I think more or less either Harris or Gruder's going to help assume that role. Pettit was, I think, assistant director of pro scouting. Now Gruder has assistant director of player scouting, which could mean college and pro. Quentin Harris, a really interesting name. He had former NFL defensive back with Arizona, spent 16 years in the Cardinals front office, was most recently their vice president of player personnel. He had turned down the GM job in New England, I assume because he knew that Elliott Wolf was going to get that job and there was no reason to interview. So that's actually pretty notable. Harris had been climbing up the ranks and been highly regarded. So to add him as a personnel assistant, not entirely sure what that role could entail. Maybe we have to see when the media guide comes out how they explain that. Could be more of a right-hand man to Andy Weidel, to Sheldon White, Mark Sadowski, not entirely sure. Max Gruder, former Pitt linebacker. That name may sound familiar. That is the reason why he had spent time with the Eagles and Andy Weidel, so a connection there. McCrite had worked as a scout for the Senior Bowl, also had an internship with the Bears, although I don't believe there was overlap with Sadowski. Sadowski was gone and came to Pittsburgh by the time McCrate came to Chicago. And Noel, longtime scout with the Browns and the Kansas City Chiefs. And that'll help again replace Kreidler, who did some Northeast region scouting this year, and Dave Pettit, who had occupied that role whenever he was a college scout. So overall, the scouting staff has gotten larger. I have an article today on this, 21 members of the scouting department, if you include, not including Colin, but including Weidel, all the scouts, the analysts like Tosin Kazim, like Donovan Moore. That's a big increase in numbers from the Colbert era. So whether that's good or bad can be debated, but certainly a lot of changes here with these scouts.
All right, good job by you. How many of these can you maybe draw links to Weidel on?
Of the new hires?
Of just really the scouting department, as it sits now.
At least two of them. There's Casey Weidel, his brother, so an easy link to draw right there. And then Max Gruder, like I said earlier, was with the Eagles. I think it's their director of pro scouting, I want to say it was. It felt like maybe there's a bit of an emphasis more on the pro scouting side, which made sense. Pittsburgh, in terms of titles, felt a bit light on their pro scouting department. You had Sheldon White running that group, but you didn't have a ton of other guys with that title, especially now that Pettit left. You had to help replace him. So Gruder and Casey Weidel certainly on with obvious connections to Weidel. There's probably others from meetings and scouting trails along the way, but those two are the obvious ones.
All right. I know you enjoy putting all that together.
And I should just note, so who is left from the Colbert group, from the Colbert era, so to speak, in terms of the scouting department guys, not including some of the cap guys or operation coordinators? It's Dan Rooney Jr., Dan Colbert, Kelvin Fisher, Mark Bruner, Chidi Iwoma, and then from the analyst side, you could consider Tosin Kazim. But it's certainly reflective of the Kahn Weidel era, this front office, this scouting department.
All right. Good job.
All right, Dave, where to here? We heard from a lot of coaches during the first day of minicamp on Tuesday. I'm sure we'll hear from some defensive guys throughout the rest of the week, Wednesday and Thursday. But let's start with Arthur Smith. He spoke with reporters on Tuesday. I don't know if there was anything earth-shattering you had heard from Arthur Smith a little bit during the draft. He had done a sit-down with Missy Matthews, I think, early in the week. And so he had already kind of had some of the questions asked and answered by Smith already, but any major takeaways from what he had to say?
I think the main thing that everybody's trying to talk about right now is his comments on the quarterbacks. And he was asked, do you view this as a quarterback competition, or are you kind of ramping Russell Wilson up at this point? He says, again, like I said, the standard is on the record. Russ is in the pole position. It's a competition. Obviously, we'll get to Latrobe, and certainly I'm sure things will heat up, but both those guys knew what they were knew when they were acquired and when they got here. I think it's been pretty transparent. I know Mike Tomlin said that on the record as well. Based on everything that he said and didn't say, has your opinion shifted in any way? Some people are trying to say, see, this is really at its core, it's going to be a competition. They keep trying to highlight that pole position phrase that's been used all off season here. Is there any part of you that believes that this is a competition in any way, shape, or form, or is this, man, Russell Wilson's just really going to have to suck bad between now and week one to not be the week one quarterback?
It's the latter. I really don't see this as a competition despite the team's framing. I think Fields will impress. I think we'll have a good summer. I think there'll be at least immediate discussion when Fields is lighting up backup defenses with his great physical talent as a runner, his arm talent. But I view this as 2022 all over, where the team framed competition between Trubisky, Pickett, and Rudolph. But we knew that unless Trubisky got hurt or completely face planted, he was going to be the week one starter. I view Russell Wilson in that similar boat.
That's where I'm at as well, too. There's nothing that Arthur Smith said and in context and everything. To me, it's him more just trying to mimic some of the things that Mike Tomlin has said to try to toe the company line, if you will. But there's nothing that leads me to believe that, barring that this is a competition. I really think either an injury would have to happen to Russell Wilson, or it would really have to be a definitive, man, he's just awful in camp and he's not playing well in preseason. So if you want to use that as, to me, it's all reliant basically on Russell Wilson maintaining the job than it is Justin Fields being able to wrestle the job away.
I agree. I'm with you. He'll have to somehow lose the job as opposed to Fields finding a way to winning it. Now, how do you get Fields work? I think they'll still carve out a package. I know Smith has deflected and not commented on those things and saying it was too early to talk about that. But I think they'll find a way to play Fields in some role, some capacity, but not as the starter. I know that obviously with his new job, he's going to talk about how he's happy to be here, but Smith really genuinely seemed happy to get that call from Pittsburgh, from Mike Tomlin after being fired as the Falcons head coach, and talked about the history of the team and the connections he has, all the kind of, 6-degree connections he had to Pittsburgh, knowing Tom Moore, knowing Mike Mularkey, all those kinds of things. And so Smith really seems to be happy with being able to land in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, this is a very important next 3 years for Arthur Smith, right? It will determine if he gets a head coach job ever again, A. B, it will determine whether or not he's anything more than a position coach, right? Because if you don't have success as an offensive coordinator in these next 3 years, odds are that if you're out, that your next job's unlikely to be an offensive coordinator elsewhere, right? So is this the perfect landing spot for him?
I think so. Maybe I'm biased here, but considering the system Pittsburgh wants to run is so aligned on a foundational level, want to be physical, want to run the ball, they have the guys that can do that. They've invested so heavily in the offensive line. You have a system of stability for Smith, of the same head coach, and just the same general structure. That's going to be important to grow your vision. Not going to be worried about getting fired after the first year if things go south. Look how long they held on to Matt Canada for. Smith's going to get, basically probably his full contract to see this thing through start to finish. And so to come to Pittsburgh, a team that certainly will be competitive and can win, I don't know what would have been a better spot for him.
I agree. But it without a doubt, it's a big 3 years for him.
Oh, yeah, no question for him and for this team. And as you said, for Mike Tomlin, he needs Arthur Smith to succeed, needs this to be the right hire. We talked about after they started this search that you got to get this OC hire right. You can't wait. You can't have excuses. You can't warm up to it. You can't give it a year. It's got to be right. It's got to be right much, much sooner than later.
All right. Parse out for me one answer that, in your opinion, that Arthur Smith gave when he was asked, can you get creative with 2 athletic offensive tackles like you have? He says, yeah, there's certain schemes you may want to run when you have more athletic tackles. That can certainly be in certain run schemes, getting them out in space, be in the screen game, whether you want to get into pulling them or whatever you're trying to do. It certainly gives you a lot of flexibility when you have athletic tackles or really athletic linemen. Is there anything there? Is it just generic? What's your thoughts?
I think I know where you're going with this, but screen game. Can there finally be a good screen game? I know it feels like we're in a desert in the mirage of a screen game. We talk about it so much. Hopefully this is the year it's like the pony backfield, but maybe you can actually see a successful running back screen game this year.
How important and how much of a luxury would that be? Because we have not seen a successful screen game with this team.
Since when?
Oh,
were they even good under Bell? I don't know if they were even a good screen team under. I believe they were probably better.
Yeah, with DeCastro and Pouncey, they were a much. We've just gotten so used to it not being good that it's hard to go back in your head and remember when it was good. But how important is it to this team to have a good screen game?
I don't want to say it's a necessity, but to have it doesn't hurt.
I will
have more options. You think it's a necessity?
I think it is with the way, especially if you look back last couple of years of Russell Wilson, how he's kind of utilized the screen game and some of the big plays they've gotten off that. The backs that they have now, especially Jaylen Warren and what he can bring you. I think it's super important for this team to have a good screen game in 2024.
I'll take it. That's for sure. And hopefully you see it and you can be creative with how you run your screen game. And if you have the tackles, you need guys who can work out in space. And, when Pittsburgh's had Dan Moore and Chukwuma Okorafor, their starting tackles last couple of years, not the most athletic, fleet of foot out in space. Not terrible athletes. They can move a bit, but not to the level that Broderick Jones can and Troy Fautanu can, assuming that he starts. So, it should be refreshing and foreign, frankly, to see a good screen game.
I don't want to act like that 2-sentence, 3-sentence answer by Smith was a aha, kind of moment. But I don't think he just, I don't think volunteering the screen game in his response was some sort of earth-shattering answer on his part. But, it did catch my eye nonetheless.
Just one overall takeaway on listening to Smith yesterday, and we had mentioned this when I wrote my big book on Arthur Smith and his story. Just the fact that he's even coaching right now, I think, is a testament to kind of his character and his makeup. When you get fired from Atlanta, 3 tough years there, he could have taken a year off. Listen, this guy's made his money. His dad owned, and I don't know if he still does. I don't think he does anymore, but ran FedEx. He's one of the richest men in the world. I mean, this guy could have just sat on the beach somewhere for a year and just hung out and counted his money, basically. But he went right back to work and is excited. And I think a pretty humble guy overall, just listening to him talk about, checking his ego at the door. Someone said, is it hard to go from head coach to OC? He said, no, it's not. I'm just here to do my job, help these guys win, praise Mike Tomlin, learning from him, talked about trying to get better. So does that mean he'll be a good OC? Does that mean that, he's destined for success and this offense will turn around? No, but I can appreciate the person, the character of Arthur Smith. And when I did that deep dive on him, everything I read, everything I uncovered talked about how hard this guy works. And this guy just, you wouldn't know kind of his story and sort of the silver spoon that he had, I guess, so to speak, growing up based on his work ethic and character.
Just in that interview alone and the one that he just had with Missy Matthews, I didn't detect any animosity. And I think the other thing is if immediately after he was hired, you go back and or back when he was hired, we went back and watched some of his coaching clinics, and I watched a few of his press conferences with the Falcons when he was the head coach. Obviously, I don't detect any change in the demeanor. In other words, he's not trying to be something that he wasn't ahead of time. I think he knows his role now. He knows that I'm not a head coach anymore. I didn't do a good enough job to be a head coach in the NFL. Now I've got to go back and reprove myself. This is a good spot for me to land. I'm on board with everything. So I think he's, from what I've seen so far, just compared to what he was in the previous years with the Falcons. I don't detect any change in attitude or any animosity or, man, I got screwed or any of that kind of stuff. I think he legitimately loves to coach football. I think he views this as a very good opportunity for himself, and potentially gives him the opportunity to maybe go back to being a head coach later on down the line.
Yeah, and at least we do know his track record is questionable head coach, but a very good offensive coordinator in Tennessee. Again, does that guarantee success in Pittsburgh? No, but we know he's capable. He's shown he can be a good OC, and that's promising going forward.
I don't think the job is too big for him. He's obviously done the job before. He's obviously been on the other end of it, being a head coach. I think there is some value to that when having a guy like that on your coaching staff.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. I think it's important. It's certainly much stronger looking higher than Matt Canada or Randy Feetner, or even just the experience aspect of been there, done that. It's not a brand new OC who's never had to call games before, really at any level. And you're not quite sure how that's going to look and fit. You have a known commodity in Arthur Smith. All right, Dave, when it comes...
One other thing, and I don't want to make this the Arthur Smith podcast either here, but what did you think about his response when he was asked, does it make it easier or harder when your quarterback room is new like this because they're all learning at the same pace? I'm not going to read out the whole answer here, but at the end he says, so to answer your question, the short answer is yes. It's a little bit easier when everybody's new.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Guys don't have to unlearn the system they were just, they have to unlearn it in a sense from their previous thought, but it's not, we're all in this together. We're all rowing the same boat of this new system, and we're all trying to pick up our new team and figure things out. So yeah, I think, we're not going to think about this too much by the time week 1 kicks off. But yeah, I think when you have a brand new room, when we're all kind of in that same situation together, it makes that a bit easier we're all understanding the situation we're in, and we're all kind of feeling the same things. And there's some comfort, I think, in that.
Right. You're also not fighting, well, that's not the way we did it last year, or,
right.
Kind of stuff there. So I do agree. To what level it's easier, I obviously don't know, but I thought he gave a great answer there.
Yeah. Dave, when it comes to things I love to talk about, we know the scouting department is one of them. Right up there with that list is Danny Smith. And we only get to hear from Danny Smith very occasionally each year. We got to hear from him on Tuesday. And of course, the big question, the big focus was the kickoff rule changes, the impacts there. And Danny Smith is all in on these changes. He says, quote, "I think it's great for football. It's a challenge and I love it." And quote, said he was part of like an 8-man committee to help, provide some input and help shape how these rule changes went and how these kickoffs look. And so, Smith admitted there's much unknown and much uncertainty about how kickoffs will function and what works and what doesn't, but he is all for trying to figure that stuff out.
What was the comment about the Europe?
Yeah, I need to dig into that more. He says he's watched other leagues with these kickoff rules, and the XFL is obviously one of them. That's basically where the NFL is borrowing this from. And he said Europe as well. And so I assume that there's some European leagues that have these kickoff changes instituted as well. I have not looked into which leagues do or don't, but I'll have to research that.
What was your biggest takeaway about what he had to say, everything related to the new kickoff?
I think honestly, because again, there's so many, everything you thought you knew about kickoffs are kind of out the window. I thought one really interesting comment was the hang time. Yeah. He said hang time doesn't matter anymore because nobody can move until that ball. Is it when the ball is fielded or when it hits the ground?
That's something else I think I got a deep dive, because that kind of that perked my ears up, and I didn't have a chance after he talked yesterday to go research that either.
Because I believe if the ball, let's say you kick it normally and the ball just hits the ground, the field doesn't get it for whatever reason, I believe you can run. But then Smith was talking about, you might see teams do line drives because the hang time isn't a factor anymore because no one can move until the ball hits the ground. But if you kick the line drive and if it's skipped, can players run at that point? I think they can. I don't know for sure. Smith even said the refs would check in with guys like him and say, hey, are we interpreting the rules the way that you're interpreting the rules? So even the officials are trying to make sure everyone is on the same page. But I thought the hang time comment was really interesting. So even just the mere look of the kick may be different. And frankly, when you hear about teams talking about we might try our safety to do kickoff as opposed to our kicker. If the kickoff arc isn't going to be necessary, then you may have a safety more willing and more able to do that. It's kind of a low line drive like a soccer kick as opposed to this high arcing traditional kickoff. So again, everything could be different.
Yeah, I think a couple of just researching it right now. I think Dave how you pronounce it? Taub said kickoff's hang time doesn't matter as far as that goes. And so, yeah, let's see. Under the new rule, the kickoff still takes place from the 35-yard line, but little else will be the same with the rest of the kicking team on the other side of the field, lined up at the receiving team's 40-yard line, unable to move until the ball touches the ground.
Okay. So I guess on a line drive, if it kind of took a hop, you could start to run at that point. But again, the usual hang time of the idea of let's have this awesome 5-second hang time to give our coverage team time to run down there is no longer a thing because that ball could be in the air for 20 seconds. You can't move until it hits the ground or it's fielded. And so there is no hang time to allow time for our coverage team to get down there. That's the point Smith is making, and that could be one big change.
All right. What else stuck out from what Danny Smith had to say?
Expecting
He's on board with Cameron Johnston.
He loves some Cameron Johnston. He's on board for big improvement with the punting game. I know it wasn't shade at Presley Harvin, but it felt like a little shade at Presley Harvin in the punting unit the last 3 years. It's been just so frustrating and poor. But Smith thinks will be big improvement, and I am right there with him.
Let's hope it is.
I think Johnston could have the best season ever by a Steelers punter, which is a pretty low bar because recent years the punting's not been good, and naturally punters have gotten better over time. But I think you're going to see some close to record numbers. I know back, but Bobby Walden back in the day, and what was his name? Bobby Joe Green too. That was Bobby Joe Green who was put some big numbers back in the 60s. But point is, you'll see, I think, a really good year from Johnston and this team's punting unit. Also, Smith addressed the kick returner situation, the Justin Fields comments. He called it a storyline. I suppose he didn't outright deny the Fields commentary about him getting a look as a kick returner, but certainly did not seem to endorse the idea either.
We got a Bobby Joe Green reference on the podcast today. Do you know what college he went to?
Well, I'm looking at his page right now, so I'm cheating here. But tell the friends where he went.
Florida. Go
Gators. So Bobby Joe Green, the other Joe Green that you might not know about, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Boy, he died young, it looks like, too. 57 he died.
I'll have to research him some, but I think he holds
he had a heart attack in Gainesville in 1993 at 57 years old. Boy, that hits home to me. I'm 56 now.
And generally from the area. Did he have the record? I think he had the record for maybe most punts or something like that. But anyway, Dave, let's go back to Danny Smith and Justin Fields. What was your read on his response when asked about the Justin Fields storyline that took the world by storm a month ago?
Yeah, what was it specifically? Let's read it off here. He just said it's a storyline. Look, he says, yeah, just that. It's a storyline. I mean, we got everybody involved. We're going to put the best product out there. You ask me who our returner is today. I have no clue. We work a lot of guides. It's a whole different process. Everybody is liable, to be honest with you, in any way, shape, or form. If he can help us win a game, we're going to put him out there, whoever that may be. I don't know.
didn't deny it. He did say he has no clue who his returners will be. I know one. We know who one of them is, but you do need at least a second back there.
Look, this I will only mention this if it works in my favor moving forward during the season here. And I only mentioned it, and I did, when the whole Justin Fields thing came up, I just said, could there be one instance where they throw him out there for whatever, to spark or come up with some sort of trickeration or what have you? It's not something I don't expect Justin Fields to be back there, 20 times, 4 times, 5 times. But could you run into some situation where you have it drawn up where just maybe one time you throw him back there along with Cordell Patterson. That's all I was trying to say when I talked about that several weeks ago there. I'm not re-emphasizing that just because of the nature of the way Danny Smith answered that question. I think in essence, Danny Smith saying, look, we'll turn over every stone imaginable in every type of situation if we think that we might be able to get something out of that. And if that includes putting Justin Fields out there on one kickoff, then you might see it. That's I'm not trying to read too much into this whatsoever. I just trying to say that it might have happened one time.
Point taken, understood, and we'll see what happens, and if we'll see if he gets any work even in just kind of the return line in training camp, which would be notable in itself. I think to the
if
Smith's
it doesn't happen I don't want people to say, see, Dave was wrong or I'm just saying that I'm just saying.
Sure. And I think Smith's comment about we're getting everyone involved, and I don't know who our returners will be, is really more of a point of we don't know what the skill set we're looking for kickoffs. Do we want the fast guy? Do we want the quick guy? Do we want the big guy, the powerful guy? We don't entirely know what the right makeup is for the returnman based on how these new changes will impact the act of the player. And so I think that's why you keep and cast a wide net until you kind of figure out, okay, this is the body type, the skill set, the traits we're looking for to be an effective kick returner under these new rules.
Okay.
Take a guess, though. Cordell Patterson's one return guy. We know that. If you had to guess based on the current roster, who will be the other guy back there in week 1 at Atlanta?
I'm going to say Jaylen Warren.
You're stealing my thunder. I'm going to say Jaylen Warren, too. I think that makes a lot of sense for that bowling ball to be back there.
Right. Because, I mean, he like Cordell Patterson, you block something up perfectly and you have one guy not fit a certain gap or whatnot. Jaylen Warren standing in the end zone.
And good luck tackling that guy full speed ahead, Warren. That is a bowling ball with legs. Not fun to do.
Whereas, look, and who obviously are the other, Calvin Austin potential. I mean,
Quez Watkins.
I mean, you could probably build a list of 5 or 6 guys,
But I think Warren, if they're going to call this a run play, which is kind of the prevailing wisdom right now, put a running back there. Patterson is that skill set, obviously, and Warren, you're not going to put Najee back there. You put Warren back there.
All right. Well, I fully expect in your training camp diaries to have a concentrated kickoff return section when it's applicable.
Oh, I'm counting down the days right now, Dave. I'm going to be happy for that. And just to the thread I was trying to pull on Bobby Joe Green, single season Steelers leader in yards per punt at 47 back in 1961. So I knew there was something there with Bobby Joe Green. So I think Cameron Johnston, he was over 47 yards last year in Houston. It was Houston, warmer weather, but I think Johnston's got a good chance to break that mark this year.
All right. Anything about Danny Smith you want to tie in here? Or
I could spend the next 3 hours talking about it, but we'll move on here to something a bit more serious. Mike Tomlin, speaking with reporters yesterday, talked about his extension, downplayed that. He said he was just happy to get the extension, to no longer field questions about his extension, but that's all said and done there. Also, of course, wanted to know, and we're very interested in hearing Tomlin's comments about Cam Sutton and why this team felt comfortable signing Sutton despite his allegations of domestic battery, his fleeing of police, being released by Detroit. You guys know the story there. And Tomlin's answer, I'll read the comment, the response off here. Quote, "It's not any conversations that we had recently. It's the totality of our relationship. I met this guy in Knoxville, man, 6-7 years ago, whatever it was, when he came out of school. He's a great guy. He loves football. That is probably the totality of our relationship. And I think that probably represents the sentiment of the organization in saying that it's less specific about conversations, particularly of late, and it's about the relationship established over a longer period of time," end quote. And so that's kind of where I was thinking where this team's head was at when they signed Sutton. I know they checked in on him a couple times in recent weeks, but I think why they signed Sutton was because they had this longer relationship with him. They knew him for 6 years, and had they not had that, they probably don't sign him. But that's, I think, the reason why they felt like they could go out there and get Cam Sutton.
And the follow up to that was when you look at the legal situation with Sutton that led to his time in Detroit coming to the end. Did that give you any pause about bringing him back in or something you have to consider? He says, certainly that's just due diligence, something we talked about expectedly after Sutton was signed. And then Thomas said that's what's supposed to happen. He was asked, do you feel comfortable after doing that due diligence? Obviously, he's here, Mike Tomlin said.
Yeah, I mean, a little snarky on that, but clearly, if they weren't comfortable with their due diligence, Cam Sutton would not have been signed. So don't know if that'll placate anyone who's concerned and upset about it. I'm not trying to say that's wrong. I think Pittsburgh is taking heat for this, and rightfully so. Had anyone signed Cam Sutton, they would have taken some heat for that. So we had that conversation about all that stuff on a previous show, but I do want to mention Tomlin's answer, to say he's a great guy. Again, they know him better than others, but based on his recent actions, at least what he's accused of, there's something not fitting there. But that's Tomlin's thoughts on signing Cam Sutton.
I guess that could have gone a level deeper there, but it'd probably been wasting breath if you would have asked him, what did that due diligence look like? You wouldn't have got any kind of usable answer.
I had the same thought. I'd love to know what due diligence was, but as you said, I don't think Tomlin would have exactly been open about what their process was. And to hear him speak, he says it's more about knowing Sutton his whole NFL career as opposed to what's going on the last couple of months.
All right, tell us about Zach Azzanni.
Love hearing from Zach Azzanni, and I think people are getting an understanding of the type of coach that he is, as we wrote about after the hire was made. Kind of tough love, no nonsense, high expectations, and the type of receivers coach this team, I think, really needs for that young, developing, kind of growing type of room. And Azzanni was critical of the group yesterday, said they did not have a good practice on Tuesday, their first day of minicamp. He talked about George Pickens and him growing, talked about being all over Roman Wilson and, staying on him to keep him working and get him to grow as quickly as possible. But I think the most interesting commentary from Zach Azzanni was high praise for Calvin Austin III. I'll pull up the quote here, but he was just gushing about the job that Austin has done over these last 2 months or so, from the phase one of, the offseason program to the first day of rookie minicamp, the first day of mandatory minicamp. Azzanni says, quote, he's been outstanding. That's a guy that's gone from here to here in the last 8 weeks. And he was kind of raising his hands to show that he had made big time progress. Quote, it's been really fun to watch. He's a worker. He's intentful. He's urgent. He wants to be coached. You can see it. His game has gone upwards. I'm really, really excited for a season if he keeps practicing the way he's been practicing. So big time praise from Azzanni to Austin.
I will say that's very important, especially kind of thinking what we know or thought we knew about Azzanni ahead of him being hired, of him being kind of a no nonsense. Can you say hard ass on this podcast?
You can.
Okay. I just did. And especially coming in and him wanting to establish himself as, I'm the wide receivers coach and all. And for his first, I guess, real interview, if you will, for him to come out, and it's just not faint praise either. I mean, he's been outstanding is quite a use of 3 words there. So I think that's very encouraging, at least in where I sit when it comes to Calvin Austin, who we've said, look, we just don't know a lot about at this point after 2 NFL seasons. Obviously spent the first one, injured and all like that. I mean, we're still have a lot more to learn about Calvin Austin and what he can and can't be in the NFL for his new wide receivers coach who, really, I guess, hard on his guys. And he said as much too. Roman Wilson probably can't wait to get out of that facility every day. It sounds like he's in his butt, from the time he gets there to the time he leaves. So I think for whatever it's worth, him saying that Calvin Austin has been outstanding so far, there's something to be read into that.
There is, and progression is what Azzanni's point seemed to be about Austin, of getting better, not just, And that's so important for him to have this continual progress, and it has to continue. I know it's spring, and I know a guy like Austin, who's athletic and I think looks good in helmets and shorts. You take that with a grain of salt, but just knowing that Azani is not probably one to give out compliments to that degree, and did not throughout other portions of that interview, given how important of a year it is for Calvin Austin, a guy to me who is certainly not a roster lock. His spot's not safe. He's battling for a job and a role and spot in this offense. And, for this guy to have a potential leg up entering training camp, does this guarantee a roster spot today? No, he's going to have to make plays in the summer and training camp and preseason. And Azani says that. It says if he keeps practicing the way he keeps practicing, he'll have a really good year. So it's not just about having a good spring. It must carry over. But I think if you go into camp, Austin may have that leg up, at least initially, to start things off.
All right. Good info there to come out of yesterday.
Anything else? Some other players who spoke yesterday, Dave? A ton of them did speak. Coaches, players. TJ Watt talked about kind of a new routine focused on maintaining and staying healthy. And that's going to be his course, not trying to go crazy in the weight room or setting all these records, just trying to be smart, get good sleep, nutrition, all that kind of stuff. So TJ Watt's getting old, Dave. And so he recognizes that and is making some changes.
Yeah, probably not surprising at its core there. And I think he was asked a couple of times about not yet winning a playoff game, right? Kind of had to comment on that. But yeah, I don't think really, was there anything notable really of any of the other players overall?
Russell, you can call him Russell Benjamin Button Wilson. He's found the fountain of youth, he says. He feels good. I know he had that tweet last week about 35, feeling 25. And so I'm not sure if it's just being with a new team and kind of getting out of the stink that was Denver or what, but Wilson says he feels really good right now.
I said this the other day, and I don't know how it's going to turn out for Russell Wilson in Pittsburgh in 2024 specifically. And some people probably think it's rehearsed and show and saying all the right things because he knows it's the right thing to say. But I think he's done everything. I think he's gone above and beyond to try to fit in with this team and this culture and the city and everything that goes along with it. I think he's been a model new quarterback for this team so far.
Sure, I agree. Although ultimately the way that his comments and actions are judged will be based off his play. If he plays well, everyone will lap up these comments and the kind of quote unquote corniness of Wilson. If not, then people will criticize. It's just the results oriented way sports in the NFL works. I want to shout out Nate Herbig for taking Zach Frazier under his wing, the way we've seen Dan Moore really accept and, not have that animosity between guys like Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu, guys who are ostensibly trying to take his job from him. Zach Frazier was speaking to reporters and said that Nate Herbig's been a really good mentor and friend to help him as he begins his NFL journey. So really appreciate that unselfish attitude by Pittsburgh's veteran offensive lineman.
Look, that's the way you kind of hope and expect it to be with this team. And they've got to get Zach Frazier fast-tracked, as much as possible to be the week one starter.
Yeah, no, I mean, you love to see it, obviously, but I recognize that's going to be tough for those guys. Herbig knows that the situation, there could have been a chance for him to start at center had they not taken Frazier or taken the center early. Same with Dan Moore, knowing that his job's going to be harder to keep when they keep drafting these guys. And, probably some guys would say, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to at least mentor you because you're trying to take my job. And that's an understandable reaction. That's a tough spot to be in. But when you have a really unselfish group overall and good people, you have to tip your hat to those guys.
I agree. What else?
Anything else here, Dave? I'm just kind of scrolling through what we wrote about yesterday, some stuff on Tom Arth. And listen, no one talks about Tom Arth, the quarterback's coach, but big role for him. Inheriting these new quarterbacks, new system overall. Not the most experienced NFL guy either. Most of his time has come in college with the Chargers the last 2 seasons. And so talking about underrated people in that building, Tom Arth is going to be one of them.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we only got to hear like one answer to a question, right?
Yeah, it was. They post the whole Steelers YouTube channel 20-minute interview. Here's Zach Azani and Arthur Smith and about 4 seconds of Tom Arth. But hopefully we hear from him at some other point, potentially.
Real quick, what do you think about Tomlin's answer to the training camp practices being moved? Most of them. How many is there? Like 10 or 11 that's going to take place at like what 10:30 or whatnot?
10:55 a.m. Yeah, all the weekday practices are going to be in the morning. And yeah, that's interesting. I think we'll write about that at some point here for the site. Just a busy day yesterday. But essentially, he said that just logistically, from a schedule standpoint, it's easier to do that. He said the problem was when they would have the practice at was it? I'm forgetting the time right now. 1:55, 2:55. It would kind of run up into these guys' evening activities because you're getting off the practice field, you're trying to hydrate, trying to eat dinner, you're going to bed at a decent hour. Just kind of the schedule was getting too tight. Some guys weren't eating dinner because they just, they had to hydrate and probably get in the cold tub, all that kind of stuff. So it was not really about the heat aspect of it, which we kind of speculated might have been, but more about logistically cleaner to be able to make sure these guys are able to be. I'm losing my train of thought here, but rehydrate, wellness. Thank you. Yeah, and just kind of rejuvenate themselves. That's what I'm looking for after practice.
Specifically, he said it just creates an opportunity for better wellness and keeping guys upright and rolling.
Yeah, and that's so important in camp because camp is a grind. You got to stay hydrated. You got to take care of your body. You got to eat too, and that can be tough. I mean, probably not always tough because you're hungry after practice, but if you don't want to eat too late and kind of be dragging the next day either. So that seems to be the reason why they'll still have the afternoon practices on the weekends and, of course, the Friday Night Lights practice at 7 p.m., but that is the reason for the change.
All right, Matthew Marksy has that written up on the site this morning.
Okay. Good deal. All right, Dave, anything else? If not, we can get to some read emails and close out today's show. Also want to just tease something I'm working on, should be for going up on Thursday morning, a study on Joey Porter Jr. Some really encouraging and promising numbers on Porter Jr. And while he says he's the number one corner in football, I don't think he's there yet, but he might not be that far off based off a data point that I and Clayton Eckert pulled, and I'll have that article up in the morning.
All right, let's see here. Garrett, let's get to some reader. I'm going to steal your line. Let's get to some reader emails and close out the show.
I'll send you a bill.
All right. Garrett Humbertson writes in, why the confidence that Pat Freiermuth will sign an extension before the 2024 season? He says, I've seen no actual smoke for that alleged fire. Isn't it more likely given that A, Freiermuth is coming off a down season, and B, Arthur Smith is a tight end friendly OC, and C, Russell Wilson is more competent quarterback pairing for with Muth than anyone that's thrown to him over the past two seasons, that Muth, will bet on himself in 2024 in the hopes of landing a bigger contract next offseason. He says, I'm not speaking to Pittsburgh's interest, only Freiermuth's strategy and what we actually know. Okay, I can see that side of it, but there's also the side of it that nothing's guaranteed beyond this season. A lot can happen this season, injury and all like that. I believe that Pat Freiermuth wants to stay in Pittsburgh and continue his career in Pittsburgh. I think Freiermuth and his agent have a good idea of what the player's value is at this point. There is some level of unknown. Look, I keep going back to a thing that Kevin Colbert always used to say. Players that maybe didn't get extended the year before, going into their final year of their contract and facing a potential franchise tag. Kevin Colbert always used to say, we get to decide when the player leaves. Mm-hmm. Really, I mean, that's what he used to say there. So even though Pat Freiermuth could look at this and say, you know what, I could exponentially increase my value by not signing a contract this year, he still has to go out and do it. And even if he goes out and does it, he would still be facing a potential franchise tag. And then, you're talking a lot of hypotheticals here, but they're used in negotiations, a franchise tag and then a potential back-to-back franchise tag, and setting a ceiling that way for a player in negotiations. It would, in my opinion, would be in Pat Fryermuth's best interest, especially if he likes where he is and thinks he can have a nice and lucrative career moving past this season in Pittsburgh, to try his best to get a deal done this offseason, especially when you talk about, guarantees this season when it comes to signing bonus and all like that. So all the smoke, I guess, non-actual smoke and common sense and just history of the Steelers dealing with this kind of player in the situation that Pat Fryermuth is in now, all leads me to have confidence in saying that I will be extremely shocked if Pat Fryermuth does not sign a new contract this offseason.
Yeah, I think the reader makes sense and some good points. And I've mentioned that before, coming off a down year Fryermuth is with the injury. But every player this summer that's looking for a new deal has to make that calculation. And a lot of these guys do say, I'm here in the summer, they're offering a good contract, I'm going to take it right now. And assuming Pittsburgh's offer is similar to what the going rate for a tight end is in that 12 to 13 million range, then I think Fryermuth says that's probably the deal I would have gotten had I had a normal and strong season last year. I'm not going to try to chase a couple extra million. I'll take what's in front of me right now. So unless Pittsburgh's offer is really low and reflective of the down year that Fryermuth had because of the injuries, I think he'll be wiser, as you said, to take the deal right now.
All right, Garrett also says, I couldn't believe my ears when Arthur Smith recently repeated the mantra about Russell Wilson being in pole position and that there will be a competition. Why not just say that Wilson is the starter, provide clarity for the team, and shut up the talking heads, he says. Even if the intention were to give Fields a chance, why this careless stoking of speculation? Wilson has the proven pedigree and was the one recruited to be their starting quarterback. Fields has a lot to prove, and even if he flashes in training camp and preseason, it's difficult to believe that they would bench Wilson before starting a single game. It seems to me the pole position and competition word games create more media fodder than is necessary and doesn't accomplish anything. He says, what am I missing? I don't think necessarily, Garrett, you're missing anything. Alex and I talked at the top of the show that we would be surprised if Russell Wilson's not the starter. I guess the overarching question out of all this, and is there any surprise that Arthur Smith's mimicking Mike Tomlin? No. I guess it's just a way to kind of, even though people like Garrett, you, Alex, me, really think that this isn't a competition, and to some degree, I guess we could also take issue with the word pole position being used. It's definitely something that Mike Tomlin is using as some sort of motivation and an escape hatch, if you will, to be able to go to Justin Fields should Russell Wilson fall flat on his face during training camp and the preseason. Did I phrase that correctly?
No, you did. Yeah. As for Arthur Smith, he's not going to be anything other than lockstep with Mike Tomlin. If Tomlin's framing it as pole position and competition, Smith's not going to come out and say, yeah, Tomlin's just giving you a bunch of noise. Wilson's going to start. Smith's been a head coach. He knows that's not what you're going to do. It's not a way to work as an organization. Listen, do they care about what the talking heads say? No, they could care less. They don't listen to what the talking heads say, what we have to say, what the national media, the pundits have to say about the quarterback battle. So that's all.
Rich Eisen reads Steelers Depot, doesn't he?
I think he does. Yeah. Hello, Rich. If you're listening, he loves talking about the Steelers blogs. I think we treat Rich Eisen's comments very fairly. But hello, Rich, and thank you for listening.
I think we send Rich
show.
a lot of traffic too. I think we do Rich Eisen a huge favor.
Yeah,
I think we treat him very fair. I love Rich Eisen.
Yeah, he's great. Now, I'm a huge fan of Rich Eisen, but I think he certainly sees some of the stuff that's written about what he has to say about the Pittsburgh Steelers and in particular Mike Tomlin. But anyway, Yeah, they don't care about the talking heads anyway. And yeah, I think it's just kind of, you have to earn that job. And, when they first signed Wilson, it was going to be initially, viewed as a battle between Pickett and Wilson. And they probably don't want to go back and just change that commentary. So let those guys earn it. Keep your options open just in case, as you said, Dave. And again, Smith's not going to say anything that's out of step with what Tomlin has said so far.
I think the overarching thing here is Mike Tomlin is just not going to paint himself into a corner for something potentially a worst case scenario happening. And that worst case being Russell Wilson just falls flat on his face.
Yeah, and just frankly, there's no need to name your starter right now in June. Now, do I want them to name one the day before the season? You probably would ideally want some clarity and finality a little bit before week 1 kicks off. But here in June, just let things play out.
Let's see. Austin Loy. I don't think we've read that name on here before. Austin writes in, "Hi, David Knox. Love the content. I was really encouraged by Joey Porter Jr.'s play last season. Watching the way he was used reminded me a lot of Ike Taylor. If I remember correctly, one of Taylor's criticism was also penalties. I was wondering if you would be able to discuss the value of the Steelers having a traveling corner and the pros and cons of this. Do you prefer this or when the corners stay on the same side of the field?"
I think it depends how good your corner is to travel. It makes me, think how much I want my corner to travel. But when you have a top end talent like Porter, I think you want somebody that can take on, with so many great receivers in football and so many of the great receivers you'll see this year, Jamar Chase twice this year, AJ Brown, CD Lamb, etc. I think if you have the guy that can do it, you take full advantage of that ability. The downsides are, you got to have another corner who can move too. The other corner has to travel too. It's not just Porter traveling. If he's moving, the other corner has to be able to play anywhere. And Dante Jackson, I think, can, but that is a consideration. If you have a guy that's only played on the left side before, got to make sure he's comfortable moving around as Porter moves around as well. What are some other downsides to traveling, Dave?
Oh, that's a good question. And I didn't think about initially when I read that, thinking what it does to the other corner there.
Yeah, he's got to move too.
And I think a positive of it is if you have a guy that can do that, it lets you kind of cheat to that other side. You hope that your guy that travels doesn't need as much of help as much of the time. It's harder for teams to scheme against you, saying, look, we know that one corner is going to be locked on that one side. I guess the other side is that teams probably have a pretty good idea. Okay, we know Joey Porter's going to go with with whatever receiver. Here's how we attack the other side. But I mean, you're doing that the other way by keeping both your guys locked in one place. So is there, it just changes the game planning. I guess to some degree there. But I'm trying to think of what the downsides of that would be. I guess maybe formationally, especially if a guy maybe doesn't tackle overly well, maybe that plays into it,
Yeah, I'm sure there's a good, thoughtful discussion to be had about that. About if a guy gets hurt, you have to kind of change your game plan. As you said, teams kind of knowing how you're going to approach things and then be able to attack that corner's weaknesses more. The receiver doesn't have to study both cornerbacks as much, can kind of really hone in on Porter and kind of focus on his strengths and weaknesses and how they'll probably play him. But yeah, bottom line is it's a good thing overall when you have a guy that has a talent and the ability to lock down and take away and match up against number one receivers. And Porter will have a big task this year for the penalties. There were a couple too many last year from Porter, but he's always going to probably have a couple penalties just kind of given his size and frame and play style. So it's going to be a little bit of a cost and worth all the positives he'll give you otherwise.
He's grabby by nature.
Yeah, when you're big and long like that, you're going to be a little grabby and test the boundaries of how much you can get away with. You want to rein that in a little bit, there's no question, but he's never going to be probably the cleanest corner in the NFL.
All right, we'll get one more in here from regular Brett Nile. Hey, David Knox, you asked a question on the podcast last Friday about why the prediction models always seem to predict a low or under 500 record? I think I may have an answer, or actually Alex may have an answer. Do you remember Alex doing a study looking back at the Steelers' record in one-score games and being much better than league average? He says in parentheses, I believe it was the best in the league under Tomlin. He says, could it be as simple as the machine can't account for the Steelers winning more than their share of close games? In other words, would the models be right if the Steelers were 500 in close games? That's a good spin.
It is. It's a great thought. I don't know for sure how some of these models calculate if those things are part of the formula, but it is a good thought just overall of why does the national media and why do maybe some of these algorithms and projections have Pittsburgh always kind of below where they actually come out? Because Pittsburgh, I'll have to pull up the data again, but they are number one in football in the Tomlin era and basically almost any subset of couple year span. Pittsburgh is number one or right near number one in winning one possession games. So they have not regressed to the mean. They've kind of, for a while, you thought, okay, it was Ben. For a while, you thought, okay, they're just getting lucky. But it's just something about this team, about Tomlin, that they're able to win these close games at an unusually high clip. It's over 60%, 61, 63% or so. So, that's probably a good reason for why Pittsburgh always seems to come in above expectations.
All right, Alex, have we given the humans enough to be happy, mad, and indifferent about today?
I think so. I think we've done our job well. So we'll come back on Friday and try to do it all over.
All right. We will attempt defense up today, Alex, I would imagine, right? Austin, all these position coaches, some defensive players, going to be another busy day for the Steelers. Day 2 of mandatory minicamp. Busy day on SteelersDepot.com. Shout out to all of our fine crew. They do an amazing job. Can't thank them enough. Alex, you as well. You do a really, really good job. I enjoy these podcasts with you still after all these years.
Likewise, the old married couple that we become.
Yeah. That's the odd couple thing.
Over my head.
All right. Until Friday, as always, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow the great Alex Kozora at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, hit SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way to take advantage of that feature on the site. Until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.